Chapter 9, why you won't get a pay rise. Now, this is something I need to talk you through so that you have a full understanding of why they're going to say no, okay? So the first reason, and probably the most obvious reason, is you haven't done the work to the standard expected of you. And if you haven't done that to a high enough level so that you could demonstrate that you have been successful, then I suggest you go back to chapter 2, right, and start again with all that list of things that you can do so that when you walk in to ask for a pay rise, it's going to be extremely hard for them to say no. But that's the number one reason. You haven't done the work required, so you don't deserve it. Let's go through some other interesting reasons that you might get. Here's the first one. I'm sorry, the budget won't allow it. Every business has an expense centre, and like most things in business, they can manage and budget for their expenses to the last dollar, and then they'll put in a figure for sales, and it's kind of like, let's hope and see if we can get that. But with those expenses, they try and stick to budget. So when you ask, the excuse may be, I'd love to give you a pay rise, however, the budget won't allow it. Difficult. One of the other answers that you might get is, not now, but later. So what we're going to do here is that all pay reviews are being done at a later date. And I love that you've asked, but I'm going to brush you off and give you a reason why I can't make a decision. You've got to be ready for that scenario. What about this one? There's a wage freeze on. I don't know who came up with this idea, but it's a brilliant idea because everyone turns around to everyone else in the organisation and says, you know what? There's a wage freeze on. Oh, bugger, I was going to ask for a pay rise. And it immediately stops people asking for a pay rise. You might not get a pay rise if you ask for one, but just because they say a wage freeze is on doesn't mean that you haven't done the work. And remember, if you're not just asking for money, yeah, keep my wages there, but I'd like an extra week's holiday. I'd like to have a new car. I'd like to have, flexible working hours. So be a bit nimble with what you ask for. Another answer that you might get is, it's not fair to other people. How does that work? You've done the work, you've done an outstanding job, but they can't give you a pay rise because it's not fair to the other people because they're not getting a pay rise. That just doesn't make sense. Your performance has nothing to do with the remuneration of other people. So you need a response for that. What about this one? You're already the highest paid person in the business in that role. We can't give you a wage rise. This is tough because, well done, you're already the highest paid person. Well done, there's probably a very good reason that you are. And if you have been performing at that high level, right, you have the right to actually ask for a change of your remuneration package. And if it can't be salary, maybe it's title, maybe it's the vehicle, maybe it's the hours, maybe it's the holidays. Keep them in mind. One of the other answers that you'll get is, look, it's just too soon. We gave you a pay rise 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago, whatever the case may be. People get paid based on their performance. And if you've done a great job, just because you got a pay rise 6 months ago, doesn't mean that you actually can't request one now, especially if you're making a difference to the company's bottom line. And one that really annoys me when I hear this, right? And it never happens with me because I am the boss. But when someone asks for a pay rise and the response is, head office said no. Who's head office? What right do they have to turn around and say no? And on what basis do they turn around and say no? Especially when your boss turns around and says, if it was my choice, I'd give it to you. But head office said no. The answer to that, I'd like to make my presentation to the person in head office that said no. And I'd like to make an appointment to do it because I now know that it's much easier to say no to a written request than it is to say no in a face-to-face meeting. So those are some of the reasons why you won't get a pay rise. Figure out your response, be prepared for the scenario, because they're just weak excuses that are really discounting the work and the effort that you've done.